Hey everybody, Gurmy's Coast Yard here, and we are here in episode 5 of Germanator Studios. And in this episode, we're starting where we left off in the last episode with our launched family roller coaster. Now, at the end of the last episode, I said we were going to finish the project in this video, but it turned out it's going to take a little more work than one video. So this will be what we do for this episode, and definitely the next episode, and we'll see where we are at the end of episode 6. But right now I'm continuing with the theme. I told you it was going to be similar or loosely inspired by The Mummy at Universal Studios, and that's sort of the theme I'm rolling with. You can see I'm building a museum type entrance, going with a neoclassical architecture style, and you'll see how I integrate that into the build as a whole. So this isn't just going to look like Greek architecture. I use the office walls here in a moment to create more of a modern building. One thing I like to do, and you can see, is I went to the scenery items and used the Roman pillar object at the front of the building. So you don't have to limit yourself to scenery items when you're building in Rollercoaster Tycoon. Wall pieces. So you can use scenery items too as part of your builds. Most of them won't work, but some of them, like the pillar, work really great in this style of building. And I think it's always nice when you can integrate them into a build. Speaking of integration, you also don't have to limit yourself to one style, one set of walls. So here you can see I'm using the office walls in conjunction with the colored wall pieces. So obviously the colored wall pieces are being used to mostly to create that Roman architecture that you see, and the rest of the build will be the office walls, but I will also use a couple other wall sets that you will see in a moment. Right here I am preparing the exit ramp, and this will basically feed off into a gift shop / area where you could buy your photos. Not that peeps can actually buy them in the game, but that's sort of the idea here. And you can see I'm working on the front. Now, one thing you'll notice is that I don't really build it from the ground up, or I don't take a linear path with my building. There you can see me putting a trim on the top, and that's another example of using the colored wall pieces, in this case the 1/3 height blocks, on top of the wall pieces from the office wall set. Anyway, like I said, you don't have to build in a straight line basically. So you can see I'm building things mainly like a framework to see how they fit with the entire build. And right here's where I start on the interiors. And speaking of things fitting or not fitting, you can see where I deleted that column or that wall, and I'm going to move that wall set to the outer side. And here I'm working on the station. I'm keeping it pretty simple because I want the station and everything leading up to it just to feel like you're in the museum and working your way up to this mummy type exhibit. So everything else up until then is pretty generic, but we'll do more with the interiors in a little bit. Right there you can see I put a curve to the silent path. That was to give myself more room for scenery, it worked, but I may go back and adjust that later, because you'll see in a moment, in a few minutes, I'll explain. So that scenery item I just placed where the mummy pops out, I had to put the walls, I couldn't line them up with the same cube that the floor was on, or the same square, because they wouldn't line up with that scenery item. And you'll see what I mean in a moment, where these walls, I'm placing them on the outside edge basically. Now the issue with that is I can't do anything to mask those, because those walls occupy the same square as the final break piece. So I can't place a wall on the opposite side. So all that's to say, I may readjust that little show scene in there so the track just goes straight, and I can move the scenery item in one piece and move the wall in one. That way it can be masked from the other side. And hopefully that'll make sense, and if I make that adjustment, you'll see what I mean as well. And now I'm placing some pillars in there to add a little more depth and scenery. I used the pillars that had the hieroglyphics, and that was about everything I could fit in there. And in this case, I decided less is more, so I'll keep it simple for that scene. And here I decided to put some walls around the statues I placed out front, and I found that the Dutch floor piece from the colonial wall set made a nice platform for them to rest on, so they're basically sitting on completely new platforms now, and I think it fits the theme of the building much better than the original. And you can see where I ramped the queue up there, so I actually got rid of the roof piece, and you can see how I used the roof pieces from the block wall set to create fake stairs, essentially. But you can see where I put the real stairs in and that arch through the entrance. And now I'm just doing the floor. So you can see, like, on the right side, I'm using the white wall pieces, right? But I can't place them to the left of there because the Egyptian wall pieces are in the way. So if that helps to clarify what I was talking about earlier. And now I'm just finishing off the flooring and the rest of the build. And more walls. It's a lot of floors and walls in this episode. And right here you can see I'm adjusting the roof. I decided to make it one piece taller. I'm trying to remember my reasoning for doing this. But I believe it was to compensate for the height of the roof relative to the roof of the office wall space. So I wanted to elevate it a little more, and I think it also was to help with the height of the walls in the station. And right here you can see where I'm putting in skylights. So I thought this would be a nice touch to help natural light come into this station. Granted, it doesn't make a difference because the scenery objects don't really cast shadows in Rollercoaster Tycoon 3, not in any significant way. But from an aesthetic purpose, it looks nice. And from a bird's eye view, you can see down into the station, which I think looks cool. And now we're just finishing off the backside of the building. And here you can see I'm finishing the floor in the connector area between the exit and load station. And here's an example of how I got rid of those wall pieces, so that way I could finish off the dark black wall on the interior, and those wall pieces are on the exterior. And that's, again, what I'm trying to achieve, or what I want to achieve in the showroom. And now you can see, I believe this is where I get started in here with some of the scenery. Oh yeah, so not quite yet. I still have to finish off the walls in there, and that's what I'm doing right here. I'm just continuing that block wall base, followed by the slate wall going up and above. And right here I'm putting in a dinosaur skeleton, because I feel like you often see skeletons like hanging from the ceiling of museums at the entrance, or they're on display. And I thought, well, that would be a nice little thing to put in the entrance, and I think it worked really well there. And here I'm just finishing off the walls, and those go up to the ceiling in there, and placing the final pieces of ceiling along the main entrance. And here I'm looking for more scenery items to place in there, but I ended up not going with anything right at the moment. I may take another look later, but I didn't think anything would work the way I wanted to, so I just left that area blank for now. We may revisit that later. And I put a sign in just to add to the theming saying, I can't remember what it said exactly, but basically like the tomb exhibition is upstairs or whatever. And here I'm finishing off the walls, bringing them up to the roof on the interior of the station. That way there aren't any gaps above them, and that just helps further block off each station and the queue from each other. And in a moment, you'll see me put the roofing back in. And there I'm just going through a couple spots and finishing off the walls on the interior. And here I did add a few more things to the interior. I thought the little metallic display points would look fitting for the museum. Also put some lighting in there and a Q-line TV, because I feel like those are all things that you would see not just in the museum but in a pre-show too, or like a really heavily themed queue. You would see those things, and some trash cans. I think it's important to place those things in queues. And here you notice I don't put a sign with the roller coaster's name over the entrance, but I do put a sign that says Museum of Natural History, just to help continue the theme. And we'll put a smaller sign at the base of those stairs with the actual name of the ride that we settle on. And I think I just called it the Tomb, or Into the Tomb, but we can pick a final one later. And now I'm getting started on the roof of the office wall section. And here I think is where the build really starts to come together. Once you start to enclose something and it really starts to be encapsulated, I think that's sort of the moment when you start to really understand how a build is going to fit in with the park. And I was really pleased with this one. It took me a little over an hour to complete from start to finish. Obviously it's not 100% complete yet. We don't get to the gift shop area in this video, nor do we get to the ride building itself, where the main part of the roller coaster is, but just the museum building itself. For the amount of time it took, I thought it was a fun build, and I would say probably intermediate level. This is definitely something that you could do on your own, but not something that is too incredibly difficult. Definitely not the most time or effort I've put into scenery in a Rollercoaster Tycoon 3 park. As for what will be the most time, or what has been the most time and effort, I'm sure some of our projects will probably be some of the most effort I put in to Rollercoaster Tycoon 3 projects. But that's neither here nor there. Those are bridges we'll cross when we get to them. Here I am just completing a flower bed for the park, or not for the park, for the museum. Like I said, having natural barriers in between paths and main buildings or feature buildings, I think, is a way to help integrate them better into the park. And with museums in general, I feel like they're always surrounded by like flower beds or things of that sort. They always look really nice in the front, and making things look nice. Greenery is a great way to do that. You can see where I experimented with some topiaries, and I ended up settling on the cylindrical ones because I thought they looked nice and ornate, but not too flamboyant. And there I finished the flower bed. And here are just some pictures of the final product. And as always, thank you all for watching. Leave your comments and suggestions below. And other than that, have a great day. See you guys in the next one. Bye.